Hello, welcome to our Sideline chat. I am Andrika Langham, P1440 Fat 50 manager, and I'm also, a little known fact about me, I am the former University of Tennessee team chef. I am so excited tonight to welcome all of you, and especially hopefully we will have some of our high school athletes in the audience tonight to take this opportunity to absorb as much as you can when we have a Q&A session at the end. I would love at this time that we will actually, I'll get to introduce you to a special guest of ours. So let me tell you a little bit about our Sideline chats with P1440. P1440, our foundation, we are aiming to bring together a community deeply passionate about empowering athletes to be the best versions of themselves. Today, we will dive into a crucial aspect of athletic excellence, nutrition. Let's jump in first, and let me introduce you to a special guest that we have, Brooke Wyatt.
Hi, Andrika. So great to speak with you this evening.
Hi, Brooke. So excited to have you with us tonight. So, Brooke, can you first tell us just a little bit about your experience, um, about your background with volleyball players, both indoor and beach?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll first just kind of give a little background on who I am so everyone gets to know what I'm all about as well, and kind of a little foundation. So I'm a registered dietitian, and I specialize in sports nutrition. My personal background was actually in soccer athletically. So I did play Division 1 soccer. Have always loved the sport of volleyball for my own fun time. No way, no shape or form am I professional level at that sport. But I do love it and admire all of the volleyball athletes that I get to work with. And over the years, I've worked with a variety from the high school level to collegiate to professional. And I just have really loved my experience the past few years working with USA Beach Volleyball. And like I said, just admire the sport and the athletes and the demand on the body and getting to help those athletes fuel their bodies. So indoor wise, I've mostly worked with high school athletes. And I have seen just the demanding travel schedule, which I know we'll talk about in a bit as well. And so that's been really interesting and rewarding to work with indoor players in that regard, the travel aspect. And then with beach, same thing, travel, a lot of international travel too, once you get up to that professional level. So again, seeing how we can best fuel our bodies at home and then maybe have that translate when we're on the road traveling. So I would say that's a huge piece of this sport. And I'm excited to really get into it with you tonight.
Awesome. I love that. So Brooke, what would you say athletes should focus on in terms of nutrition in the hours leading up to their game or competition? And then also any specific advice that you might give to a beach player that has to deal with different outdoor environments and weather conditions?
Sure. Yeah. So first, so kind of the first part of that you mentioned was, how to prepare for maybe a training session, competition, tournament, whatever it may be. We want to make sure that we are getting in a good, we can call it like the pregame meal. I think most athletes are familiar with that meal, but really understanding when to have it, how far in advance, is it an hour before? Is it I don't have a meal at all because I don't want to have too much food in my stomach. There's so many questions about it and everybody is unique. So tonight we'll be giving a lot of information, but know that everyone is different and we all have different needs. So this definitely isn't going to replace maybe advice you've been given by like a medical professional or someone that you work with. But generally speaking, before a competition or any kind of really intense training session, we want to make sure we're getting in a good sized meal about 3 to 4 hours beforehand. So we do have time to digest that food. And I think the best way to think of it is, can we split up our plate into 3 sections? Maybe you guys have seen those before, like in health class or something, where it's a plate and you split it up into your carbohydrates, your proteins, your fruits and vegetables. And that's seriously the simplest way to remember what to eat so that you are feeling fueled and energized for that training session. And so I would really want to hone in on the carbohydrates for energy. So, Andrika, the main thing you asked was like, how do we prepare for this competition or this match? It's basically going to be carbohydrate focused. So things like pasta, rice, potatoes, bread. These are really great sources of energy because carbohydrates are what give our body energy. It's the fuel for our muscles and our brain. So we want to make sure that we aren't skipping out on carbs. And then as well as the protein. So maybe that's eggs or chicken, turkey, things that are going to be really easy on your stomach to digest. And then adding in some fruits and vegetables. So that's going to be the way that we can get a really balanced meal to make sure that we've got that energy for the match, or, whatever type of training you're doing. So pre-game meal, 3 to 4 hours beforehand with those 3 main components. Does that kind of answer that first part?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay,
Do you,
awesome.
do you need me to repeat the second part?
No, I think I remember it was just relating to the kind of different environment training as an outdoor athlete. Yeah. So I think most athletes have been told to make sure they hydrate. That's obviously important and not probably new information. I just like to point out that hydration does typically need to go a little bit further than plain water, especially when we're outdoors in very hot environments. We're sweating out. Obviously, sweat is liquid. So we're sweating out water, but we're also sweating out things called electrolytes. Again, many of you have probably heard that term before, in like a sports drink, like a Gatorade or something. But we actually have electrolytes in our body as well. And when we're sweating, you can actually be losing a lot of those electrolytes, and that can affect how you feel, how hydrated you are, and your overall performance. So I like to remind beach athletes, especially, that if we're outdoors for over an hour training, usually in tournament situations, we're out there for much longer than an hour. We do want to be having water, but also some kind of sports drink that has electrolytes in it. So that would be my key takeaway, as a reminder for those outdoor training or, competitions.
So Brooke, what to give a little bit to put it in perspective for the athlete and the parent.
Sure.
Typically like 4 hours that they're outside playing. What would the ratio to, to water to the electrolytes? Because I personally, we have seen that firsthand when someone is like, we've seen they're like, oh my gosh, they're dehydrated. And they're like, I've been drinking water all day, Miss Andrika. And it's like, and we tell them it's more than water, and the parent feels awful because they're like, oh my gosh, I've been filling up their water bottle. And it's like, they forget about the electrolytes. So could you please speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's so much good intent with hydrating and having enough water and water. But yeah, we just don't recognize that the main electrolyte we're actually losing in our sweat is sodium. So again, there's that misconception that we should be avoiding sodium and salt and, get sodium free or low sodium products, where an athlete actually does need salt and sodium. So it doesn't even necessarily need to be a beverage like a Gatorade, or there's so many packets of electrolytes now. It could be something as simple as having some pretzels as a snack, in between sessions or in between matches. Having salty snacks are really good options as well, especially if you're someone who doesn't like sports drinks, because that's common. And you could just pair that with your water. So I would say we don't have to go overboard. We don't need to be, drinking 5 Gatorades while we're out on the sand. It's just mixing it in. And maybe if you're out there for 4 hours, maybe you're having 1 to 2 electrolyte drinks. And ideally, we need fuel that amount of time as well. If we're going to be training for that long, our body can only perform at a high level for so long with that, pregame meal or whatever it was, that lunch or that breakfast. We do need to pack some snacks as well. So it's a really good option to have like a fig bar. Those always are really easy on your stomach for digestion, and they've got some salt in it. Peanut butter filled pretzels. Those are always a hit. Little snacks like that really go a long way, and they contain the salt that I was mentioning as well.
Great. Love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about post game or post training? And what is the best way to refuel?
Yeah. So it's kind of same thing. I like to talk about nutrition in the way that we talk about like warm-ups and cool downs. We're not done with the training session or the match or the competition until we've done the cool down, right? Like that's a part of recovering your body. So we need to think about nutrition in that way as well. We're preparing with fuel, either a meal or a snack or something to make sure that we've got the energy to perform at a high level. We also want to make sure we're recovering with fuel. Because if you do think about your body in the analogy of like a car, we're putting fuel in the tank. We're going to use all that fuel. We need to put it back in the tank when we're done so that the next day or the next competition, whatever you have, we have energy for it. And so we want to make sure that after we finish and we're recovering, we're not only doing protein, because I know most athletes have heard to have a shake or some kind of protein when they recover to help with muscle recovery. That is amazing. I like that step is always taken care of, but we just forget about the carbohydrates as well. So we do want to have carbs to help our muscles recover similarly with the protein. So I think just as a recap, protein and carbs are very important, pre and post. So thinking of it, just kind of those two things. The vegetables and fruits, those are really great too, if we can add those. But I do like to just keep it simple if we can, and protein and carbs for energy and recovery. Any like maybe more specificity that I could get into, or what are your thoughts on that?
No, I love that. I actually have one daughter that um like is not a heavy eater before she starts playing, um because of nerves, like she doesn't. But then I have one that literally like will report you if you don't feed her before eat. So, like you said, like truly knowing your body, and like you said, refueling, because otherwise your body will truly break down. And I've seen that, in not only in my own girls, but also in athletes. Like that's the first thing. Like I always say, the more snacks you have throughout the
Yeah.
day while playing. And I always like to say, just imagine if you're going on a road trip and if you break down, like you want to have enough food to refuel your body throughout the day. So,
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And I think nerves are always going to be a component to being a competitor. I think that's just part of who we are as athletes. And oftentimes we don't have an appetite, like you mentioned with one of your daughters. So even if you could get in liquid fuel, like a smoothie, applesauce pouches, there's so many things we could do that maybe we don't think of, because it's like, oh, that's not a meal. Like ideally in a perfect world, if we could eat, that'd be awesome. But when we have nerves, we still need to get some fuel in and find a way to make it work, and not use the nerves as an excuse, because we want to make sure we can still perform.
right. And you're so right. Like a literally like a shake or um um that does the trick. So it's just giving her something, and it's like packed with, fruit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's see. So I love my role as the Fat 50 manager, often known as Beach Mama. And I get to work with the best juniors across the US in this game. But many are like traveling frequently to play all across. Um, what would you say to help them with, if they're your clients, to help maintain their nutrition routines while on the road? So it's not fast food, like, several, like if they're trying to, keep their healthy, nutrition or their diet, that they're doing at home. What recommendation would you give? Because some of them are actually playing like tournaments 1 to 2 times a month, but wanting to stay healthy on the road. What advice would you give them, Brooke?
Yeah, I think that's a huge question. And like I said, that's been the biggest factor of working with this community of beach athletes. And so I can say that packing ahead of time, nailing down some snacks that work for you at home that could work for you on the road. So like I said, if you love the fig bars as a snack, or applesauce pouches before you get on and start the match, little things like that go a really long way. And bringing your own, let's say you like oatmeal and you don't think the hotel is going to have oatmeal, or the hotel isn't going to be open early enough, their breakfast isn't open. There's so many things like that that you just can't always control. And so I think as you get older and compete at a higher level and continue to advance in your career, you'll recognize, there's a lot of independence, I think, that comes with this sport. And a lot of, I guess, self responsibility, where it's going to be on you to pack those snacks and pack maybe some backup protein bars, or like I said, the oatmeal packets, things that are going to work for you. And so that if you can't find a Starbucks that has a breakfast sandwich or whatever it may be, that you've got that option, and they're just, there's no excuses, and you're prepared. So I think preparation, it's challenging because everyone's busy, but at least having those maybe like as a backup option will really make sure you're set up for success.
And one thing, this is just a tip. This is the chef and me coming out. I know this is one thing that we did a lot, especially during COVID. We would always, my husband would like grill chicken, like ahead of time. And so we would always just bring like, salad, separate, grilled chicken. And then my girls are big on Caesar salad. And it was just something easy, simple that we could just make on the go. And we would have that for tournaments, that we could just make, however, add tomatoes to it if we wanted to, cheese. And that was something that was just so simple that we could do and just still feel so clean as a family that fast food that we were eating or convention food that we were eating. So that's something easy too, especially when it's not wanting to eat a sandwich or a burger or whatever. So that's a
Yeah.
little throw in as well.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And it's that planning piece that can just get lost in the mix when our weeks are so crazy. And then, oh, shoot, now I have to travel or there's just a lot going on. But I think if it gets to a point where you're like, I just don't feel good at these tournaments because I'm continuing to eat McDonald's. Yeah, I think change will happen. So it's doable. It just takes some extra planning.
Oh yeah. And it just, it makes you sluggish as a player, to play, when you're fueling your body. I always say, whatever you put in, that's what you're going to get out, so it just slows you down in your game.
Yep.
Okay. So at P1440 Foundation, we believe in empowering athletes both on and off the court. How do you help athletes, Brooke, strike a balance between their nutritional needs and their lifestyle outside of sports?
Yeah, totally. That's a huge piece for every athlete, I think. There's a lot more to the athlete as a human. So I think making sure that we have kind of like the last question, some preparation, some planning, a little bit of focus in terms of nutrition around the training piece, the competition, but then also being able to go out with friends and not be, so robotic that you can't enjoy the burger or the pizza, the ice cream with your friends, knowing that this isn't an everyday thing. And maybe this doesn't support me as an athlete, right before a match, but right now I'm me, I'm with my friends and I can enjoy a night out of maybe not foods that I don't eat all the time. So I think it's just having that grace with yourself as well. And that one meal once a week or whatever doesn't define us. And making sure that we do enjoy our favorite foods. Because again, I keep saying fuel when I'm talking about food and nutrition, but it also should be fun. And food is such a huge part of all of our lives. And it's that community piece. It's that brings us together. So it should never make you feel like an outsider, like you can't participate. The balance can be harder, easier said than done. But as my goal when I work with athletes is like, let's keep this fun. Let's make sure you're enjoying your favorite foods.
Right. Now let me ask you this. So do you, whenever, like, do you ever have like where athletes are like, can you give me like a plan of like working, like of balancing the meals? Like, do you think that's healthy with athletes, like of trying to set a plan? Or do you think that it's like going down a road that you really shouldn't with young athletes? What is your take on that?
Yeah, I think typically, like if I'm asked for a meal plan, I'll kind of push back and just say, would that work? Would having a piece of paper with, Monday through Sunday, every meal, every snack, like, is that sustainable? Is that something that you think you would actually follow? If the athlete says yes, 100%, okay, let's try it out. But I think 99% of athletes say, probably not. My schedule changes on a dime. Like, I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow. So how am I going to know, to prepare those foods ahead of time or whatever it is? So more so than not, I would say probably not going to work to have a strict plan because we're not robots. But I think understanding, like in the beginning, when I was saying how to build that balanced plate, a protein, a carb, a fruit and veggie, maybe some healthy fats, figuring out that formula, you could create a balanced meal just about anywhere if you understand what makes up that balanced plate. And so I think when there's a little more education and understanding of how we're eating and what we're putting in our bodies, you don't need a plan because you've figured it out on your own and you feel empowered to make those decisions. And that's always my goal working with athletes, is kind of the self-empowerment piece.
Okay. So I would say that this time, I think let's take some questions from our members. What do you think? Are you up for that, Brooke?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great question. Are there specific tools or apps that you use to track and analyze the nutrition for clients? Great question.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Um, there are quite a few that I use on, I would say, like the practitioner side that's maybe not as user friendly for like the athlete. There's a couple that I know a lot of people like just because they're so easy and they do contain most food products out there. I think MyFitnessPal is probably the most common one that I hear of athletes using. Um, there's also one called Chronometer that I've liked and I've used with some athletes. I think there's like a zillion. They're all pretty similar. I would just say if you're interested in tracking, and this is what I tell the athletes I work with, it's better as like a self audit than like a lifestyle tool. So it's very tedious to enter every single thing you eat. And I think it's a good way to just check in if you want to track for a couple days and just see where you're at. That's great. But realistically, we're kind of learning what we need, what our body needs, and we don't need to track every day. And we just use the tool to kind of check in and see if we're eating enough typically.
Yeah, great question. Because I've been asked that. And of course, with me working with the University of Tennessee athletes, I mean, I had football, baseball, basketball, swimming and diving. And so, I mean, I would have, profiles where it was like gain, lose, maintain. And so, and that was the difference with the profiles. Typically with beach volleyball, some of them actually are trying to gain, or maintain. And so some of them are really like, they'll come to me and say, what do I need to do to gain? Like what meals or food for me to gain? And so that's what I tell them. A good way is to track what you're eating, especially leading up to the tournament and the day of the tournament. So that's great advice that the apps that you're giving. So, cause some of them are like, they focus so much, or they just skip meals too. A lot of kids are just skipping meals, which that is a big no-no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree.
Let's take another question. Okay. What advice would you give to young beach volleyball players who aspire to reach the elite level in terms of habits they can build?
Yeah, that's a big one. Yeah, I think, gosh, my advice, where to me it's big, but to other people it feels very boring and simple. It's really not. It's really hard to do the simple things, the boring things, I think, day after day. And I was actually just talking about this with coworkers. The good quote, Kobe Bryant quote of like just really loving and not getting bored of the boring things. So making sure you've got your sleep dialed in, hydration, not skipping meals, as you just mentioned, not using caffeine or coffee or Celsius as a meal replacement. I think I see that way too commonly. Understanding that nutrition is, like I said, it's more than fuel. It's everything. I'm biased because this is my profession, but understanding that could make or break a lot of careers, just not putting enough of the right nutrients in your body. And so if you're here tonight, I think you obviously have an interest in nutrition and understand that there is a component of it to your success as an athlete. And so just nailing the foundations and trying not to get caught up in all the trends on social media of a supplement or a certain diet, and really just sticking to those basics, because I promise you that will take you much farther than a fad.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's take another question. Love this. How did you get into nutrition?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. For me, it was just being an athlete, and understanding how the food was affecting my body in high school. I had anemia, which I think a lot of female athletes can relate to. So I had really low iron levels. I just wasn't eating enough. I think looking back on my fueling, it wasn't enough. And I was a very fit athlete and I was getting winded going up my staircase. And it was just like, what's going on with me? Like, why do I feel so out of shape? got my blood work done and I was pretty severely anemic. And so I think that was my first kind of hint at, sure, there's maybe a component here, puberty and all of that. But also, that means I need to pay attention to what I'm putting in my body and how I'm fueling if I want to take it to the next level. So once I made that like light bulb connection, it was like, wow, I want to do this as my career. And I actually knew in high school that I wanted to do this and work with athletes. Because these are my people. This is who I relate to. And so I wanted to stick around athletes and then make sure they feel as best as they can using nutrition.
Yeah, I can relate to that too. I mean, even when I was the team chef with University of Tennessee, like I would meet a high school recruit, like a top recruit, and it would be someone so dialed into their body and nutrition. It would say, hey, um, I like myself, I don't eat beef or pork. I've not eaten it since I was in high school. And that would be like a connection that I would have with an athlete. And they would say, like, I'm anemic, how will you help me? Supplement, like I really don't like to take a lot of supplements. So how will you help me with that with my diet? And so it would be an automatic connection that I would love hearing that from a high schooler coming in on a recruiting trip. So I would have loved hearing that from you coming. Oh my gosh, like a soccer player saying that, because it's true. Like when someone's already dialed in with their body and knowing like, this is what I need to perform, and knowing certain foods that will help them with that. So it was great. So, and I would love that I could pick up on certain athletes, like skipping out on meals because drop weight. And I'm like, come here, and just knowing right away, because they're thinking if I skip a meal when I weigh in, it's like, it doesn't work like that. And so educating them. So
it's huge. I think that's great. They have you as a resource.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. What's your biggest challenge working with elite athletes?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't have that many challenges, to be honest. I am so grateful that that's the clientele and population that I work with. It's such a fun group of individuals who really just are striving for greatness. And so they want to soak up any information and my knowledge. And those conversations are just incredible. I think a challenge in general is the amount of information out there. And so, like I said, if we want to stick with the basics that maybe aren't as exciting, then there's all these distractions, And so keeping athletes on a kind of like tunnel vision path of like what we're doing is working. It's only been a month, like give it more time. We don't need to introduce these flashy supplements or, random lab testing that maybe it'll help, maybe it won't. It's hard to know in the beginning. Once we've got the basics down, the foundation, then we could sprinkle in some of those maybe flashier things. But there's just so much out there. And so sticking to the basics may be a little bit challenging when you're at the top and you're like, but I just need to be 1% better to outwork or, beat my competition. I want to try this fancy flashy thing. And so for me, it's like, if we haven't, we don't eat breakfast, why are we going to introduce that, random supplement? So little things like that pop up.
Right. Now, I love, Brooke, that you brought up, because I see this so much, that you brought up then with Celsius. What is your take on the Celsius and the Alani? Like, what is your take? Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. And I think caffeine has its role in high performance. Like there's tons of research that it's a great option to have 30 to 60 minutes before competition to support focus. But I think the kind of misconception about caffeine is that it's going to give us energy, like usable energy. So that's why it's used in place of food. And so really caffeine is just telling something in our brain that we're not tired, but it's not going to give us that usable fuel the way that like a banana would or a PB&J. Like food is going to help us with performance, whereas caffeine can help maybe with focus, and telling us that we're not tired, but it's not going to maybe help in the long term. So my take on any kind of energy drink in general or caffeine is just shouldn't replace a meal. So it's not breakfast, and it shouldn't replace like pregame actual usable energy like food.
So if they're going to drink it, probably towards the end, like after they've played, not really like while you're playing, right? But and if they're gonna drink it.
Yeah, and again, carbonation, if it's one of the carbonated drinks, that's not really ideal, a good way to be hydrating. I would, I would choose like a sports drink or something with electrolytes in water versus, yeah, like a carbonated energy drink while you're playing.
Okay, great. Okay, let's see. How do you tailor your nutrition plans to meet the individual needs of the athletes you work with? And second part, are there any common trends you see with athletes?
Yeah, absolutely. So the nutrition plans that I am working on with my athletes, everything is super individualized. So it's not going to be, like I said, a cookie cutter meal plan. Here you go, follow this. Everything needs to go based off of how the athlete's feeling and what their goals are. So typically we'll run through, what are our goals? What are our current habits? And that includes sleep and hydration, any kind of like recovery methodology. Like I want to know everything about the athletes to create an individualized plan. Also, preferences are huge. I think a lot of athletes that I've worked with tell me that they work with maybe a dietitian or a nutritionist who just kind of tells them what to eat, but doesn't actually inquire what the athletes like to eat. So it doesn't go very well. And so all those factors really need to be in play to support, like you brought up, okay, is this a weight gain athlete? Is this a maintain? Is this a lose? Are we building muscle? There's so many factors that can go into it. And even if they have blood work that they've done, are there any vitamin and mineral deficiencies? There's a lot of pieces that can go into that. And so it really just depends on person to person, how we're creating those plans. But it all comes back down to how are we performing and how are we recovering? I think those are two really good questions to ask yourself at the end of the day. Like, did I perform well? Did I have energy? And how is my muscle soreness? Because those are some really good things that could be telling us if we aren't putting the right things into our body. And then the second part was any trends. I mean, everyone's on TikTok, so any trend that seems to pop up on a feed is brought to my attention. A lot of it's supplements, so like athletic greens. Trying to think of other trends. Maybe it's intermittent fasting. A lot of them are just trends. So people ask me about it, but no one seems to really try them long term. They're just curious about them. So I'm never going to tell you you're dumb for bringing that to my attention. Don't do that. I like to have the conversation. Like, let's talk about it. Let's educate. And then you can make the decision. And typically the athletes decide it's probably not sustainable. But I think it's just good for us to understand the why behind things rather than just be told like, no, don't do that. We want to make educated decisions for ourselves. So that's what I enjoy doing.
Right. Okay. Oh, I love this. Okay. What is your favorite part about working with USA Volleyball?
Oh, there's a lot, but I have to it's the people. I think I mentioned this, but I didn't have any connection to volleyball much until a couple of years ago when I started working with USA Volleyball. And I mean, I was always like, oh, biased towards soccer, but man, volleyball athletes are some of the most humble, like down to earth people, and just the community itself, indoor and beach. It's a community, and I just love that feeling of like, maybe it sounds cheesy, but it feels very like family oriented, a lot of support for each other. Obviously in beach, there's a lot of like, there's partners involved and there's partner changing involved. And so that's kind of crazy. But at the end of the day, there's so much love and support for each other. And so just getting to be around that type of an environment where it's like high performing athletes who are seriously some of the most incredible athletes on this planet, yet such good people. And so I think just getting to be around that has been very rewarding for me. And yeah, I'm grateful.
I agree. What is the hardest and best part of working with high school athletes?
Hardest, I would say I think it's just really challenging for the schedule of a high school athlete. I think there's so much good intent of like wanting to get good routines, but that also requires like getting up early to make breakfast or getting up early to pack a quality lunch, making sure you have snacks for, between school and practice. Oh, do I have a recovery snack for after practice too? Like there's just a lot of moving parts as a high school athlete. And so I think it can just be tough for the athlete themselves to feel like they aren't failing if they don't do that every single day. So I think really a reminder is that we're not supposed to be perfect. That's not the goal. It's just kind of little improvements every day. And so if you're someone who's like overwhelmed by making nutrition changes, my recommendation is just to always start with one thing and build off of that and get really good at that one thing. Just like with your sport, it takes practice. So you can think of your nutrition as we're practicing it during the week. So by the weekend, when we have a tournament or whatever it may be, we're feeling confident with our nutrition. And it's not like, oh my gosh, it's game day. I need to eat. Like she said, I needed to eat 3 hours before. All that preparation during the week is leading up to the performance on the weekend. So same thing with nutrition. And so I think, again, that leads me to the second part of the question of the best part of working with high school athletes is when we see the success and like the light bulb or the habit sticking. Even someone who never drinks water and they tell me, oh my gosh, I'm finishing my hydro flask by the end of the day. It's just those little habits that make, the biggest difference. And those are really rewarding to me. Obviously, I love when someone wins a tournament or wins a medal. Like that's obviously the best. But as a nutrition coach and dietitian, I like seeing these habits building because those are going to stick around for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. So I want to jump in on that question too. I think the hardest for me is to watch the level of comparison that high schoolers have, because I don't really remember that from high school. Of course, I think social media plays so much into that. But then the best part to me is when they reach that goal, and it's like when they've chased that goal down and their success, but then it's like they really don't get the chance to like really celebrate it, because then it's like on to the next, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's like, if I could really just tell a high schooler, it's just like, just savor the moment, because I mean, you have your whole life to be an adult, right? I mean, so just savor the moment of each little goal that you're trying to chase, because you have your whole life to be an adult. So
yes, you do. But yeah, I think it's an amazing time in your career. I will say career just because I know there's a lot of really top level athletes here in this community. But it's only the beginning, and this foundation of nutrition will only support that longevity of your time as an athlete, and in not only your energy levels, your performance, but your recovery, which I think is often forgotten about. And that recovery piece is just massive for preventing, injuries or anything like that.
yeah, and just taking care of your body. I mean, like literally, like I always think, like what you put into your body, you'll feel it like a couple hours or the next day. Like if you overeat, like on Thanksgiving, a couple hours of the next day, you're like, oh my gosh, why did I do that to myself? So, or if you don't drink enough, if you don't hydrate, I mean, your body, you're going to feel it. You're going to see it in your skin, you'll feel it in your hair. So it's just like really treat your body well in your nutrition and your hydration.
I can't disagree. Totally.
Okay, so let's see. So this was fun. I mean, it was fun for me. I hope it was fun for you, and of course everyone watching. And thank you so much for joining us tonight, Brooke, and all of our P1440 members. Now, Brooke, if I'm sure everyone's going to have more questions for you, especially for those that were not able to join us live and they're going to watch the playback. What would be the best way for people to get in?
Yeah, I am. So yes, this was really fun for me. I had a great time chatting with you. I feel like I could go on so many tangents. I love this topic. Of course, it's my career. So if anyone wants to chat more, they can actually reach out on social media. I think that's a great way. You could follow me. I know, this is my handle right here. Instagram is kind of more my lane. So if you want to send me a message, if you have questions, I also have a website you could check out. I'm just typing it out right now so we could put it up. I have my own private practice. It's called Long Game Nutrition, and I do work with athletes one-on-one.
Okay.
So if you're interested, you can check out that website. I'm always happy to work with athletes one-on-one because I know there's so many questions. And like I said, we're all individuals. And so we've got different needs.
Well, great. Hopefully we'll be able to have you on. We are actually in the tryout phase with our Fat 50 for 2024 class now. So hopefully we'll be able to have you on with our Fat 50 ambassadors as well, because such a wealth of knowledge from you tonight. Any final thoughts you would want to share?
Yeah, no, I just really appreciate whoever took the time to spend the evening with us or watching the recording. Just good luck to you all. And this was super fun.
Well, thank you. Okay. We want to thank everyone so much. Our mission with P1440 is to empower all of our members by giving them the tools they need to flourish in the sports and their careers and beyond. And we hope tonight was all that you wanted it to be. And thank you for joining us tonight.
Awesome.